Chapter 8. Was Jesus Christ the only Son of God? In a sense, I have already answered this question. Everything in the world of form is created from God's substance. Without Him was not anything made that was made. Therefore, every life stream is a son or daughter of God. However, there are many devout Christians who feel very strongly that I was someone special, and there is some validity to this belief. I am not thereby saying that I completely agree with this belief. I am merely saying that it is understandable why so many Christians hold on to this belief. Let me explain. What does it truly mean to be a son or daughter of God? God has given you free will, and God has given you the ability to create. Originally, your life stream was created in the image and likeness of God, meaning it had a unique individuality. However, your spiritual parents did not create your individuality as something that was set in stone. You have the free will and the creative potential to build your own individuality upon the foundation laid by your spiritual parents. This is indeed what you are meant to do. Therefore, life can be seen as a process through which your life stream is constantly building its sense of identity. In an overall sense, you are meant to keep building your sense of identity until you reach a point where you realize that you are an individualization of God and that you have the full creative powers of God itself. That is why I said, "Ye are gods." However, when a life stream falls into a lower state of consciousness and forgets its spiritual origin, the life stream begins to build a false sense of identity, a pseudo-identity. From God's viewpoint, that false identity as a mortal human being is not real. Yet, as long as your life stream accepts that sense of identity, the pseudo-identity becomes the only reality that you know. Therefore, that sense of identity becomes the life stream's reality. Because the life stream knows nothing else, it does not realize that the pseudo-identity is unreal and temporary. To the life stream, this is the only sense of identity there is. The viewpoint of the life stream. From God's viewpoint, a lost life stream is still one of His sons or daughters. Yet, if you go inside the box of the life stream, inside its sense of identity, that life stream does not see itself as a son or daughter of God. Therefore, in the here and now, the life stream is not acting as a son or daughter of God. If a life stream does not accept its divine origin, it cannot express its divine potential. If a life stream does not accept its potential to be the Christ, then the life stream cannot be the Christ in action. When I appeared on earth 2,000 years ago, only a few people had come to the full realization of their Christhood. Therefore, one might say that I appeared to be the only Son of God on earth. I had realized the fullness of my sonship, and therefore I was, and I acted as a Son of God. In other words, when you look at the situation from a specific viewpoint, it is possible to say that Jesus Christ was indeed the only Son of God who appeared in that particular place at that particular time. Therefore, I can understand that some Christians have strong feelings for this idea. I am not saying that I share those feelings. Unfortunately, most people never understand that the statement that I was the only Son of God was correct only from a certain viewpoint. The death consciousness has a tendency to create idols. Therefore, people were quick to turn me into an idol and to start believing that the statement that I was the only Son of God was universally true. Let me make it clear to you that every live stream is, in reality, a son or daughter of God. If the live stream does not identify itself as a son or daughter of God, then that live stream cannot express the fullness of its divine potential. Therefore, from an earthly viewpoint, the live stream is not a son or daughter of God. The live stream has the potential to act as a son or daughter of God, but that potential is not realized. Yet I want to make it clear that I am not the only person to appear on earth with a full recognition of his or her divine identity and origin. I am not the only person to appear in the fullness of Christhood. There have been others before me, and there will, I sincerely hope, be others after me. In fact, I hope that some of the readers of this book will be counted among them. The doctrine of exclusivity. Why did the idea that I was the only Son of God ever become an official doctrine of the Christian Church? I have already given you part of the answer, namely the death consciousness and its tendency to create idols. Let me explain this in further detail. To the death consciousness, everything is relative, nothing is absolute, nothing is final. The consequence is that the death consciousness can never take full responsibility for anything. The human ego simply cannot come to the realization that I made a mistake, I was wrong, and I am the one who needs to change. The death consciousness is the ultimate master when it comes to creating excuses for why a person doesn't have to change. If you look at the history of humankind, you will see this psychological mechanism at play in numerous circumstances. Human beings have a very deep resistance to change. Take a look at my embodiment on earth, and you will see how often I rebuke those who were not willing to embody my teachings and change their sense of identity. Did I not say, "Woe unto you, lawyers! You entered not in yourselves. You were not willing to let the truth of God change you, and those that would enter you hindered, in an attempt to build the case that if no one else changes, you do not have to either." Why are human beings resistant to change? I earlier stated that all human problems spring from ignorance. If people truly understood that their actions were hurting themselves, they would change their behavior. The problem is that as long as a live stream identifies itself with the human ego, the live stream will never know. The live stream will never realize that an act is hurting itself. The reason being that the relativity of the death consciousness can always come up with an explanation to justify the person's actions and beliefs. If everything is relative, nothing can ever be completely wrong. Therefore, one can always come up with some kind of justification for an act. And if an act can be justified, then why would you have to change? As long as a live stream identifies itself with the death consciousness, that live stream will reject the truth of God. The live stream will reject the truth because if it accepted the truth, the person would have to change. If the live stream knew better, it would simply have to change accordingly. What happens when a person is confronted with a true statement, such as my outer teachings? Because the ego does not want the live stream to escape its control, the death consciousness will seek to find some kind of relative justification for why the idea isn't true or doesn't apply to the person. That is why you see so many people, even many people who consider themselves to be devout Christians, who come up with incredibly intricate arguments for why they don't have to follow a particular aspect of my outer teachings. Of course, such people will also find ample reason to reject my teachings, and that is why they simply cannot discover those teachings. The Sword of Christ. I hope you can see what I'm trying to explain here. As long as the live stream identifies itself with the ego, the person does not see any reason to change. That is why I said, I come not to bring peace, but a sword. The sword that I came to bring is the sword of truth that cleaves the real from the unreal. That sword is the Christ consciousness. To the death consciousness, nothing is really wrong and nothing is really right. Everything is relative. To the Christ mind, there is an absolute standard for determining right and wrong. The Christ mind simply asks, is it of God or is it not of God? If something is not of God, then it is unreal, and it must be changed right now, right here. In the Christ mind, there is no variance or turning, and there is no room for intricate arguments to justify anything. If something is not of God, a Christed being will immediately leave it behind. When the life stream begins to unite with the Christ consciousness, the person becomes willing to change. Through the Christ consciousness, the life stream can gain an ultimate perspective on what needs to change. As soon as the life stream receives the understanding that a particular act or idea is wrong, then that person will instantly leave its old ways behind and embrace the new understanding. You might recall the story of how I gathered my disciples. Imagine yourself being a fisherman at the Sea of Galilee. It is an ordinary day, and you are going about your daily business of cleaning your nets. Suddenly, a stranger appears in front of you and says, "Leave your nets, and I will make you fishers of men." How do you think a person who was identified with the ego would react to that situation? The person would immediately start evaluating, judging, interpreting, and explaining away the significance of the situation. The person would come up with all kinds of excuses for why it did not have to follow the Christ, or why it did not have to follow the Christ right now. I am telling you that there were indeed people who reacted this way when I came to them. I called more than 12 people to be my disciples, yet not all of them answered the call. Those who did answer the call did so because they had already attained a certain measure of Christ consciousness, and they were willing to follow their inner understanding. Therefore, when I appeared to them, they recognized me as the Christ in embodiment, and they were willing to follow me. These blessed life streams did not argue or interpret anything. They instantly recognized me, and upon that recognition, they immediately made the free will decision to leave everything else behind and follow me, the living embodied Christ. When a life stream is identified with the ego, it cannot recognize the Christ, and therefore it cannot follow the Christ. The person simply cannot leave its nets of entanglement with the conditions of life. Today, more life streams than ever before are ready to leave their nets and follow the Christ. Yet 2,000 years ago, that was not the case. Only a precious few had attained that level of consciousness, and the multitudes were still so identified with the death consciousness that they simply didn't want to be bothered by the appearance of the living Christ. They wanted to remain in ignorance so that they would not be disturbed and have to change their ways. Therefore, these people were more than happy to accept the idea that Jesus Christ was the only Son of God. Why is this so? Because this gives them the ultimate excuse for continuing their lifestyle. If I was the only Son of God, then they could not possibly follow in my footsteps. Therefore, they could do nothing to work out their own salvation. They simply had to wait for the outer Savior, namely myself, to come and save them. If I was an example to follow, then people might have a responsibility to follow me. In other words, if they had the potential to become Christed beings, and if doing so would require them to make an effort, they would have to change their ways. They would have to leave their nets. Do you see how the idea that I was the only Son of God can become the ultimate excuse that gives people the perfect justification for continuing in their ways? Human beings are psychological beings. You can look at human history and you can try to find outer explanations for why people have done what they have done. Many modern scientists and historians have tried to explain human history in terms of such outer factors, be they economic, sociological, or political. In reality, the only way to explain human history is to look inside the human psyche. Everything springs from a process that takes place inside the human psyche. People's outer behavior begins as a process in the psyche. People's outer behavior is simply the effect of what is going on in the psyche. If you want to understand the effect, you must understand the cause. If you want to understand why certain images appear on a movie screen, you cannot confine your investigation to the movie screen itself. Unless you go to the projection room and investigate what is on the film strip, how could you possibly understand what appears on the movie screen? The ongoing human power struggle. I have given you the inner explanation for why so many people have accepted the idea that I was the only Son of God. Let me now give you the outer explanation. Why do you think the Jewish authorities wanted me executed? It was because they saw me as the ultimate threat to their power over the people. If you look at human history, you will see that some people have had an insatiable desire for power and control. This desire for power is based on a psychological need, but I will not go into that for now. Let us simply acknowledge the fact that at any time in history, there were people who had this desire for power. These people had a desire to attain absolute power over others. You must understand that to these people, religion has always been a threat. What the members of this power elite want is to attain ultimate power here on earth. They want to set themselves up as the ultimate authority, an authority that cannot be questioned or gainsaid. The biggest problem facing the power elite is that most people stubbornly refuse to let go of the idea that there is an ultimate authority which is above and beyond this earth. As long as people believe in a God who is above and beyond any force on earth, no person could ever attain ultimate power on this planet. No matter what the kings and the emperors do, they will always be second in command. They might be able to exercise great power over the people, but they can never attain ultimate power. The reason most people on earth do not understand the existence and methods of such a power elite is that most people simply do not have an insatiable desire for power. Therefore, they cannot imagine that someone would do absolutely anything to attain power. I know this is a difficult topic that you would rather not think about. Yet for a moment, try to imagine how this power elite thinks. Their first and foremost desire is to completely wipe out religion on this planet. A planet without religion is their ultimate dream because on such a planet they have the potential to set themselves up as the ultimate authority. Today they are aggressively pursuing this ideal, and they are using science as their main tool for attaining this goal. Yet the general population stubbornly refuses to let go of the belief in God. If you cannot make people abandon the belief in God, then what are your options? You can follow the motto, if you can't beat 'em, join 'em. In other words, if you cannot make people abandon their belief in God, seek to use that belief as a tool for attaining power over the people. How can you do that? You can do so by using organized religion. You start by promoting the idea that a particular church is the only true church, meaning that it provides the only road to salvation. Most people have a need to feel better than others, so this idea is sure to find widespread support. Then, you set yourself up as the leader of this church. Finally, you promote the belief that the leader of this church is the mediator the only mediator between God and human beings, and that His word is infallible. If you can make people accept that your church is the only true path to salvation, and that the leader of that church is the only true mediator between them and their God, then you have, in effect, set yourself up as the ultimate authority on earth. Even though people still believe in God, they think that they can know God's will only through you, and therefore you have become an authority which cannot be questioned or gainsaid. If you were a person who had an ultimate quest for power, where would you have wanted to be during these past 2,000 years? I will tell you where such a soul would want to embody. It would want to be the Pope of the Catholic Church. Before that, a power-hungry soul would have wanted to be one of the temple priests of the Jewish religion, because they too had set themselves up as the ultimate authority between the people and their God. Gods on earth. If you want to understand my true teachings, you must recognize the existence of a power elite consisting of people who want to set themselves up between God and humankind. You must understand that it was this power elite who plotted my death. You must also understand that part of my Galilean mission was to bring forth the judgment of this power elite. That is why I said, "For judgment I am come." For thousands of years, a small group of souls have repeatedly plotted to set themselves up as an authority that stands between the people and their God. I came to judge some among this power elite, and by their act of killing the embodied Christ, they did indeed receive their judgment. These souls are no longer on planet Earth, but that does not mean that the entire power elite has been removed from this planet. Why did the Church create the doctrine that I was the only Son of God? The very essence of the message that I brought forth 2,000 years ago is that the only true mediator between God and human beings is the Christ consciousness. The universal Christ consciousness is the open door that no human can shut. Therefore, each human being has the potential to attain individual Christhood, and through that individual Christhood, each human being can commune directly with God. When people have attained a certain level of Christhood, they do not need an outer hierarchy in the form of an organized church. I am not thereby saying that an organized church or outer church becomes unnecessary. What I am saying is that people do not need church leaders who serve as the communications link between them and God. They do not need to have church leaders who deliver to them the Word of God or interpret the Word of God. They can receive the living Word of God directly in their own hearts, and they can understand that Word through their individualized Christ consciousness. This is the true message that I brought to earth. The power elite of the Jewish religion knew this very well, and that is why they killed me at the first possible opportunity. This power elite hoped that by killing my physical body, they had also killed me and my teachings. This hope was shattered by the fact that I had the ability to commune with my own, even though my physical body was no longer walking the earth. Some of the early Christian writings, such as the Pistis Sophia, records that I appeared to my disciples for a number of years after my resurrection. This is the truth. I did indeed appear to them, and therefore my teachings did not die with my physical body. For many years after my resurrection, the Christian movement did not have a clearly defined and organized church. It was not clearly defined and organized because I had not instructed my followers to create an official church or set forth an official doctrine. Instead, I instructed my followers to put on their individual Christhood and then listen to my voice as I was speaking to them inside their own hearts. For some time, the Christian movement was a loosely knit network of people who were, in various ways, pursuing the path of individual Christhood. Today, this movement is often referred to as the Gnostic movement. The Orthodox Christian churches often looked upon this movement as being chaotic and dominated by false teachings and dangerous ideas. The Gnostic movement was indeed somewhat chaotic and disorganized, yet within that movement were individuals and groups of people who truly followed my inner teachings. After a surprisingly short period of time, something very peculiar began to happen. An organized church started to form. This church gradually became more powerful, and it began to define and enforce an official doctrine which supposedly set forth the true teachings of Christ. Interestingly, that doctrine did not contain the idea of individual Christhood or an individual path to salvation. Instead, the only path to salvation goes through the sacraments and doctrines controlled by the organized church. If you want to know my immediate personal reaction to this development, it is this: where in the hell did that idea come from? Forgive the bluntness of this expression, but I am using it for a good reason. The reason being that hell is exactly where the idea came from. I can assure you that the idea did not come from heaven, because up here we all know that the path to salvation is the path of personal Christhood, and that it is an inner path. Therefore, this idea could only have originated in a state of consciousness that is based on denial of God, denial of self, and denial of self as God. In reality, this idea came from the very same power elite who, for thousands of years, have attempted to set themselves up as the ultimate authority on earth. In the beginning, the powers that be aggressively tried to destroy the Christian movement. When they realized that this could not be done, they decided to join the Christian movement and use it as a tool for attaining power. The oppressive church. The development of a Christian church that was designed to be a tool for gaining ultimate power took some time. It did not really come to fruition until the Roman Emperor Constantine decided to use the Christian church as a tool for uniting his ailing empire under one religion. The Roman Empire was based on a simple idea. This idea stated that the Roman Emperor was the only representative of God on earth. Therefore, the Roman Emperor was the ultimate authority figure, and he could not be questioned or gainsaid, even if he committed acts that were clearly insane. Does it not seem peculiar to you that after the formation of the Roman Catholic Church, the leader of that church suddenly became the only representative of God on earth? I am aware that the organized Christian church previously contained the concept of a vicar or Christ, yet it was not until after the formation of the Roman Catholic Church that the Pope attained the status of the ultimate and only representative of God on earth. Likewise, it was not until the formation of the Catholic Church that the Church began enforcing, through excessively militant means, the doctrine that Jesus Christ was the only Son of God. What I am trying to help you see here is that my true inner teachings have been taken away from the people. At the same time, those inner teachings have been replaced by outer doctrines, which are in direct opposition to my inner teachings. My inner teachings state that every human being has the potential to manifest Christhood. Therefore, Jesus Christ was not the only Son of God. Jesus Christ was the example who was meant to show that all people have the potential to claim their divine inheritance. Each son and daughter has the potential to walk the earth as a Christed being. If you belong to a power elite who wants ultimate power here on earth, you realize that a Christed being is the ultimate threat to your authority. A Christed being recognizes only the authority of God. A Christed being will follow an earthly authority, but only if that earthly authority is in alignment with the will of God. And because the Christed being knows the will of God, the Christed being can never be fooled by the false claims of an earthly authority. Now imagine that a Christed being, namely myself, suddenly appears on earth and challenges those who have set themselves up between the people and their God. The power elite attempts to deal with this threat by killing my physical body. Yet even before they have time to congratulate themselves, I begin to speak to my followers and to encourage them to become like me. The power elite now faces the sobering realization that instead of having to deal with only one Christed being, they could potentially have to deal with thousands of Christed beings. They know that if this were to happen, it would mean the end of their reign on this planet. If other people started to embody the true teachings of Jesus Christ and putting on their individual Christhood, the power elite simply would not be able to stop the rising tide that would eventually wash away their empires of power. Through these Christed beings, God could put down the mighty from their seats and exalt those of low degree. Therefore, the power elite had to make a determined effort to completely obliterate and distort my true teachings. They had to make sure that no other human being could or would dare to follow in my footsteps. My beloved hearts, do you see that this is precisely what they have done to my true teachings? So far, they have been largely successful in preventing other people from following in my footsteps. It is my deepest desire, and it is the deepest desire of my Father in heaven, to change this situation. The key to changing this situation is that you must make the choice to pursue your individual Christhood.